I'm going to play for you a video clip of what Michael Wolff said Epstein told him was in the safe and what he showed the author was in this safe. Okay, so that's great. So wouldn't it be great if FBI subpoenaed the estate of Jeffrey Epstein for all that information?
The estate is under no obligation to provide that material, even pursuant to a subpoena. That's a great point.
Yeah, that's just false.
Okay.
That's just false. You're the FBI. You can subpoena the information from the estate, and you better do that.
Kash Patel walked into that hearing room thinking he was bulletproof. Hours of grilling were already behind him. Every Epstein question, every release timeline, every legal technicality, he had rehearsed it all. His answers were locked. His posture was steady. He was ready. And then Ted Lieu did something nobody saw coming. He didn't pull out a document. He didn't quote a statute. He didn't even raise his voice. He just pressed play. A journalist's voice filled the room. A safe, a story, and something Jeffrey Epstein allegedly hid inside it that, according to this journalist, the FBI director sitting right there had never publicly acknowledged. What happened in the next 5 minutes wasn't a debate about law. It wasn't a fight about procedure. It was about 3 things the FBI director could not or would not answer. A journalist sitting on 100 hours of Epstein, recordings the FBI may have never even touched. A safe full of photographs Patel insisted didn't exist. And a client list with 2 names he refused to confirm or deny. 5 minutes, 3 unanswered questions, and a congressional record that now contains every single word of it. Before we go deeper, quick note. We've covered pieces of this story before, but with new details surfacing and the entire Epstein file suddenly back under the spotlight, there are gaps here that demand a closer look. So consider this the update. If you're new here, hit subscribe. We break these stories down as they unfold. No noise, no theatrics, just what's actually on the record.
Have you asked to talk to Michael Wolff?
You raise a great point. I haven't personally asked to talk to Michael Wolff.
Has the FBI asked?
But the FBI, I'll get back to you if the FBI specifically
so Michael
asked
has
ever.
About 100 hours of testimony of Jeffrey Epstein. Wouldn't it be good for the FBI to interview Michael Wolff?
I'm not saying they haven't, I just don't know.
Has FBI subpoenaed the tapes that Michael Wolff has conducted of Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't know.
Now, to understand why these 5 minutes hit so hard, you need to understand who was asking the questions. Ted Lieu isn't your average congressman. Before politics, he was a JAG officer in the United States Air Force, a military prosecutor who built cases in a system where vague answers, sideways dodges, and I don't know responses don't just fail, they get noticed. He rose to the rank of colonel in the Air Force Reserve before retiring in 2021. He holds degrees from Stanford and Georgetown Law, and he sits on the House Judiciary Committee, the exact room where this exchange happened, on Patel's 2nd straight day of congressional testimony. That background isn't a footnote. It's the entire reason this hearing went the way it did. Lieu wasn't fishing for a viral clip. He wasn't a politician chasing a soundbite. He was a trained interrogator across the table from a man who, in Liu's eyes, should have come prepared with answers, not deflections. So when Patel said, "I don't know," Lieu didn't hear what most people in that room heard. He heard something else entirely, and he was about to use it. He started simple. The FBI searched Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan mansion in 2019. Patel confirmed it. Inside, agents recovered a safe. Patel said he didn't have the evidence catalog in front of him. Stop. Read that again. The director of the FBI, testifying about the most publicly examined case under his entire oversight, does not have the evidence catalog in front of him. Lieu pressed forward anyway. The FBI found a safe, correct? Patel said he'd accept Liu's representation. Not yes, not confirmation from his own knowledge. He would accept the congressman's word for what his own agency had recovered. Inside that safe, Lieu continued, agents found a collection of photographs. Same answer. I'll accept your representation. I don't know. Lieu didn't let it slide. This was front-page news, he said. The New York Times reported it on July 8, 2019. A trove of photographs discovered in a safe at Epstein's Manhattan mansion, disclosed in the charges filed against him that year. This wasn't buried in some classified annex. It was everywhere. And the FBI director was telling a congressional committee he wasn't aware of it. That phrase, "I'll accept your representation," became the tone setter for everything that followed. Because here's what it really means. An FBI director who accepts a congressman's account of his own agency's evidence catalog is a director who has either not reviewed the case carefully or has decided not to admit it on the record. Either possibility is its own headline. And Lieu was just getting started. Now enter Michael Wolff. If you don't know the name, Wolff is one of the most recognized journalists in Washington. He wrote Fire and Fury, the explosive insider account of the first Trump White House. But that's not why he matters here. By his own account, Michael Wolff is the journalist who spent more time with Jeffrey Epstein than anyone else before Epstein's arrest. Roughly 100 hours of recorded interviews, conducted over multiple years. Portions of those tapes are already public. In one of them, Epstein flatly describes Donald Trump as his closest friend for a decade. That's not a rumor. That's a recording. Released. Reported on. Discussed for years. Lieu played a clip. In it, Wolff describes a very specific moment with Epstein. A moment where Epstein walked over to his safe, pulled out a stack of photographs, and spread them across a surface like playing cards. Wolff describes exactly what Epstein claimed those photos contained. Lieu paused the video. Then he turned to the FBI director and asked the question everyone was waiting for. Are there any photographs showing Donald Trump with individuals connected to Epstein's operation? Patel said no. Lieu asked how he knew. Patel said any such material would have been brought to light by multiple administrations and FBI investigators over the last 20 years. Lieu cut him off. That is just not true. And then he dropped the example. Nobody, not the FBI, not multiple administrations, not 20 years of investigators, surfaced the birthday message Trump reportedly sent Epstein. That didn't come from the Bureau. It came from the Wall Street Journal. And when it surfaced, it was the Epstein estate that handed it over to Congress. The FBI didn't find it. The FBI didn't disclose it. The FBI didn't even seem to know it existed until outside reporting forced it into the open. Patel paused and said, "You raise a great point. Sit with that." Patel had just argued, moments earlier, that 20 years of FBI investigation would have surfaced any significant Epstein material. Lieu gave him one documented, public, undeniable example proving the opposite. And Patel's response wasn't to defend the Bureau. It was to agree. "You raise a great point," from the director of the FBI, on the record, under oath, about the completeness of his own agency's review of the most scrutinized case of the decade. That is not the language of confidence. That is the language of someone whose own argument just collapsed under him. And Lieu hadn't even gotten to the tapes yet. Michael Wolff holds approximately 100 hours of recorded interviews with Jeffrey Epstein. These aren't whispers in a dark room. They aren't anonymous leaks. They are journalist interviews, recorded across multiple years, partially released, reported on by major outlets, and openly discussed for years. In November 2024, Wolff released the recording where Epstein calls Trump his closest friend for a decade. The tapes exist. They're known. They've been written about. They represent the most extensive on-record account of Epstein's private world that exists anywhere outside of the FBI's own classified files. So Lieu asked the obvious question. Has the FBI subpoenaed the tapes Michael Wolff recorded of Jeffrey Epstein? Patel said he didn't know. Lieu pressed harder. Would it be useful for the FBI to interview Michael Wolff? Patel said he couldn't say whether they already had. He just didn't know. He'd get back to Lieu with a specific answer. Read that again slowly. The director of the FBI does not know whether his own bureau has so much as picked up the phone to call the journalist sitting on the largest on-record interview archive of Jeffrey Epstein in existence. That's not a small gap. That's not a procedural technicality. That's the FBI director, under oath, unable to say whether his bureau has even attempted to access the most extensive collection of Epstein recordings outside of its own evidence locker. The tapes have been public knowledge for years. The question of whether the FBI moved to obtain them isn't obscure. It's foundational. And the answer was, I don't know. Then Lieu shifted to the Epstein estate. He pointed out, again, that the birthday message didn't come from the FBI. It came from the estate. And he asked the obvious follow-up, shouldn't the FBI subpoena the estate for everything it still holds? Patel said the estate is under no obligation to provide that material, even pursuant to a subpoena. Lieu stopped him cold. That is just false. You are the FBI. You can subpoena the information from the estate, and you should do that. Patel said, that is literally not how it works. Lieu said he was moving on. That disagreement didn't get resolved in the time available. But the weight of it should hit you immediately, because one of those two statements is wrong. If Patel is right, then the FBI has no path to any material the Epstein estate hasn't voluntarily surrendered. Period. The case is sealed off by the estate's own choice. If Lieu is right, and as a former military attorney, he is not someone who throws subpoena law around casually, then the FBI has had that path the entire time, and has not used it. One of those is true. And the FBI director's response, that the estate has no obligation, wasn't an answer about whether the Bureau had explored its legal options. It was a wall. And then Lieu closed with the heaviest question of the day. The client list. Patel had already confirmed, in earlier testimony, that a list of names connected to Epstein's operation exists. Attorney General Pam Bondi had confirmed the same thing publicly. Earlier in 2025, Bondi told reporters the list was sitting on her desk under review. Then a later DOJ memo concluded there was no client list in the way the public had imagined one. 2 confirmations, 1 denial, never cleanly resolved. And Lieu had 2 specific names he wanted to ask about. Is Prince Andrew on the list? Patel said material related to Prince Andrew had been made public. Lieu asked again, is Prince Andrew on the client list? Patel said the FBI had released the index of names. Lieu pivoted. Is Donald Trump on Epstein's client list? Patel said the index had been released, and the index would speak for itself. That is not an answer. That is the carefully constructed shape of an answer with the answer surgically removed. Lieu wasn't asking about the index. He was asking about 2 specific names, on a list the FBI director himself had confirmed exists. A yes or no question, asked twice, answered neither time. If the answer is no, that is 1 word, 1 syllable. Patel did not say it. Lieu closed his 5 minutes by telling the committee, directly on the record, that it was a significant red flag that the FBI director could not say whether Donald Trump was on the Epstein client list. The chair called time. Now step back. Look at what those 5 minutes actually contained. Patel said photographs of the kind Wolf described do not exist, and in the same exchange, admitted the FBI had no idea about the birthday message until outside reporting surfaced it. Patel said he did not know whether his bureau had even made contact with the journalist holding 100 hours of Epstein interviews. Patel refused to give a yes or no when asked whether 2 specific names appear on a list he had already confirmed exists. None of that is accusation. None of that is speculation. Those are the answers the director of the FBI gave under oath to Congress. The pattern was consistent. I'll accept your representation. I don't know. The index will speak for itself. 3 phrases, repeated, attached to the most direct questions of the entire testimony. Each one technically responded to the question. None of them actually answered it. And here's what makes this exchange impossible to dismiss. None of Liu's questions were speculative. He wasn't asking Patel to confirm rumors. He wasn't reading anonymous internet claims. He was asking about publicly documented material, evidence in major newspapers, recordings already released, investigative steps the FBI either took or didn't take. The safe existed. The photographs were reported. Wolf's tapes are real. The birthday message surfaced through outside reporting, not through the FBI. None of that was in dispute. What was in dispute was something narrower, and in many ways far more damaging. Whether the FBI had actually pursued the material available to it, and whether the director of the Bureau was willing to say so clearly on the record under oath. That's where the hearing turned. Because every time Lieu narrowed the question down to something specific, Patel moved sideways instead of forward. Did the FBI subpoena the tapes? I don't know. Did the FBI contact Wolf? I can't say they didn't. Is Prince Andrew on the list? The index was released. Is Donald Trump on the list? The index will speak for itself. Those aren't denials. They aren't confirmations either. They are answers engineered to avoid landing anywhere. In congressional testimony, that kind of language doesn't go unnoticed. Especially not by someone like Ted Lieu, whose entire line of questioning was built to force clarity, one careful step at a time. That's why the exchange escalated the way it did. Not because voices were raised, not because anyone lost control, but because the more specific Liu's questions became, the less specific Patel's answers became. By the end of those 5 minutes, the the hearing was no longer just about Epstein. It had become a test of credibility. Could the director of the FBI confidently explain what his bureau had done, what it had reviewed, what evidence it possessed, in one of the most scrutinized criminal cases in modern American history? He never quite established that confidence. And that's why these 5 minutes spread the way they did. Not because they produced a smoking gun, they didn't, but because they produced something Washington often considers just as damaging: visible hesitation on questions that should have had clean answers. That's what kept resurfacing, in clips, in transcripts, in commentary, long after the hearing ended. Not one explosive revelation, a repeated pattern. I don't know. I'll accept your representation. The index will speak for itself. 3 phrases, looped, attached to some of the most direct questions of the entire testimony. And once those phrases enter the congressional record, they don't leave. No matter what comes next. There's one more layer here that became clearer once the hearing wrapped. Patel wasn't testifying as a junior official unfamiliar with the file. He was the director of the FBI, the person ultimately accountable for the Bureau's investigative decisions and public credibility. That position changes the standard entirely. When an FBI director says, "I don't know," about a minor detail in an obscure case, that's one thing. But when the case is Jeffrey Epstein, examined for years, across multiple administrations, under international scrutiny, with sealed records and constant allegations of incomplete disclosure, every uncertainty carries triple the weight. Lieu understood that, which is exactly why his questions stayed locked on process. Did the FBI review the tapes? Did the FBI pursue the estate? Did the FBI verify the photographs? Did the FBI know what was in the safe? Not political questions, operational ones. Questions about what investigative steps had actually been taken. And Patel's answers repeatedly circled back to the limits of his own knowledge instead of the actions of his own bureau. That distinction may end up mattering more than any single answer he gave. Because congressional hearings aren't only about facts. They're about perception. About whether the person testifying looks fully informed, fully prepared, fully confident in the institution they lead. For critics of the FBI, Patel's answers confirmed what they already suspected, that parts of the Epstein investigation were either incomplete or never fully pursued. For his defenders, the hearing showed a director responsibly refusing to speculate publicly about sensitive material in an open session. But even the most generous defense leaves the same central issue untouched. The questions were direct. Many of the answers were not. That gap is what turned an ordinary oversight hearing into a national moment within hours. Because viewers weren't trying to decode complicated legal language. They were reacting to something far simpler, a senior official being asked clear questions and repeatedly refusing to give clear answers. That dynamic doesn't require political alignment to recognize. It registers instantly, and it became even more pronounced near the end when Lieu stopped trying to extract explanations and shifted to something else entirely, putting the uncertainty itself onto the record. That's the real weight of his closing statement about the red flag. He wasn't fighting over a document anymore. He wasn't pushing for a specific investigative step. He was arguing that the inability, or unwillingness, to answer clearly had itself become the story. That is a brutal position for any FBI director to be in publicly, especially on a case where public skepticism has been building for years, and where every unanswered question instantly creates 10 more online. By the time the chair ended the round, 2 competing narratives were already forming. One said the hearing exposed major unanswered questions about the Epstein investigation and proved the FBI still cannot clearly account for key pieces of evidence and testimony. The other said the hearing showed how impossible it is to discuss sensitive investigative material publicly without feeding speculation far beyond what the evidence supports. Both narratives are colliding in real time. And the reason this hearing keeps circulating, keeps getting clipped, quoted, debated, reposted, is because neither side believes anything was actually settled in that room. If anything, the exchange did the opposite of settle things. It cracked open questions a lot of people thought had been answered years ago. And those questions aren't going back in the box.